shoot.
Okay, we're going live.
Now?
We're live now, yeah.
Hi, folks. Welcome to our Saturday Night Live. What is the date? August? I keep wanting to say September.
August 26th.
August 26th. We haven't been here for a bit because Frick's schedule is a little bit rougher in the summer. So tonight we have a very special one. We're going to cover the process of through dovetail from start to finish, and with a purpose. A friend of mine called me the other day. His name is Wayne Lousteau. I met his barber. Just kidding. There's a story behind that. Anyway, Wayne owns 3 woodcraft stores, 2 in Colorado and 1 in Omaha, Nebraska. And he met up with a chap named Michael. And Michael, unfortunately and tragically, lost his 4-year-old son, Jackson. I can remember the 2 names because of the Michael Jackson. Anyway, he wants to build an urn for his son. We just built one actually for Super Dave. It needed a little bit of help on dovetails, so I thought, well, we can certainly help him out that way. So I'm going to walk through the process of cutting a through dovetail. I've got a piece of poplar and a piece of walnut. We wouldn't do it any different with any other species of wood. So by the end of it, you'll be an expert and be able to do it yourself. Now, I want to just tell you briefly why we're here. I just told you that, but why we do these. We run a program called the Purple Heart Project, where 6 times a year we bring in 7 combat wounded veterans from all over the world, as you can see by the flags. We've had them from Denmark. We've had them from Canada, mostly from the United States. I don't have an Aussie flag up there yet, but we have had 2 from Australia, and we've had 1 from Ireland, so I'm missing 2 flags. We bring them in and we treat them to a 6-day hand tool workshop, very intense. And we treat it as if it was 150 years ago and you're learning to build furniture. So everything is processed by hand. Of course, the first thing you have to learn how to do is sharpen. So we spend the first day learning how to freehand sharpen, no jigs, all 5 fingers on each hand. And then we learn through dovetails and half-blind dovetails. We learn mortise and tenon through wedge tenons. We learn how to take a rough board and make it flat, smooth, and square on all 6 sides. Real interesting process. We do that, and we've done it. We've had 24 classes to date. Our 25th class will be 4th week of September, and then our last class will be the 3rd week of October. We've had somewhere around 165, 170 wounded vets go through the program. We want to do a lot more. It's expensive. Of course, everything has risen in costs. But we've also had a lot of people who wanted to help. And I've got to mention this because this just happened. So a week ago Monday, we have 3 Airbnbs that we intentionally built for housing the vets when they're here, but big expense for just 6 weeks of the year. So we Airbnb it when we're not using it for that purpose. And Frick called me up. Frick's my son-in-law who manages the Airbnbs, and he said, do you remember the chap's name, Frick? I didn't ask for permission anyway, so I won't use his name. Anyway, Frick said, hey, there's a guy here from Quebec who's staying in the Airbnb tonight, and he actually brought you some machinery. Well, I didn't know anything about this, but Jake and Luther did. So I came down the next morning, and they had unloaded these are all going to be for sale on our site. He donated this machinery for us to turn around and sell it to raise money for the Purple Heart Project. So there was a large automatic lathe for copying. So if you wanted to make 15 baseball bats, you turn 1, and then you use your little guide and you turn 14 more, or whatever else you want to make. There was a 20-inch bandsaw made in Italy. There's a 10-inch General table saw. That's not General International, that's General Canadian. There was a General International 2 or 3 horsepower dust collector. It looked like it was almost new. Several pipe clamps. And then we got talking, and he said, do you want the trailer? Well, this is a tandem trailer with a, what do you call that gate on the back, Jake, that folds down like that? That gate that folds down like that? Drawbridge gate. How about the height? What's the dimensions of the trailer? I don't know. Can't remember. It's big. Big trailer. Manufactured last July, so he gave us that as well. So that was awesome. The kind of generosity that we witness is phenomenal. So you want to participate, you want to be part of this, two things. You can help us out financially. You can make donations tonight. There'll be links there. And you can also help us find wounded vets that need what we do. And there's the easiest way to do that is just to send them to thepurpleheartproject.com.
Org.
.org, sorry.
Or .com, they both work.
Or .com, we have both?
Yeah.
Okay. And that money will go toward whether it's buying a plane ticket or tools or food, whatever. We are now officially a 501c3 in the United States. That's a registered charity, a nonprofit. I can't remember which one it is. So it's separate from RC Woodworking. And we are in the early stages of doing the same thing in Canada. I'm told it's going to take about 6 months. So, and what else? I need to say hi to Angie. Angie is sitting at home, anxiously waiting for orders for t-shirts to come in so they can go to work packaging them. She and her sister Lynn do all of that for us. And I want little housekeeping today. So I put an American flag up in here, and I can't remember who sent that to me. Do you remember, Jake? That banner down below? This flag flies in memory of Super Dave Benson?
Yeah, actually, that's not ours. That's mine. My wife bought it for her.
Well, it's on the wall now. I was wondering where that came from. And then if you look over here, I put my, Kevin Burris does laser engraving on stone. So I've got my success as a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And what else did we do? Oh, we lifted the, we moved the dovetail samples from Philip Gustafson and Marshall Rommel a little bit. Other than that, we just swept the floor and tidied up. So, we ready to go? Anybody else I need to say hello to? Here's how we're going to do it tonight. They're just going to throw questions at me while I'm working. I'm not, in order to get through this, I can't stop and thoughtfully answer questions. So, I think Jeff O'Connor and Kevin Burris are on, so they'll help out answering questions on there as well. And I assume Luther's on, and Ken's here. So we got lots of help. So Frick, you just fire away with the questions.
Luther had to go
whenever.
to his local Starbucks to get internet.
Yeah.
So
He
he
did?
probably has a pumpkin spice latte on his lap.
Oh yeah.
It's not quite September, so
Is he a pumpkin spice latte kind of guy? I didn't think that.
I think so.
So I'm going to show you a few things as we go throughout the night. Big announcement on this. This is officially called the hand plane shooting board grip. Luther has his own cute little name for it, but we're just going to call it the grip. And they will be here. Packaging, everything's all done and ready. They'll be delivered September 2nd, you said?
Early September.
Very early September. You'll be able to get it. I want to show you something else too that I got this week. Thanks to Harold Snodgrass. Harold works here. He told me about.
Can you?
Oh. Well, I'll do that for a little bit of a break halfway through. It's really, you're going to like that. Okay. No, I'm diving into this. So here, just a couple of examples. So here's some, we are working on, I'll give you a little progress report too. So I don't know if you remember, but 8 months ago, we decided to build a tool cabinet, and that tool cabinet will be filled with tools. We're going to let you guys pay for the tools, so you can donate. This will be completely filled, all brand new tools, and then we are going to somehow use it to raise money for the PHP. I don't know whether we're going to auction it or raffle it or whatever, but it's made out of walnut. We're just working on the drawers. So the drawers, and the dovetails are designed to come through, so it's going to be dovetail mania. Dovetails everywhere you look, through wedge tenons on the side. The sides are aspen, nice and white, that comes through. And then we've got walnut slips. And the walnut slips serve two purposes. They increase the wear surface without increasing the weight, but we made them fairly long so that they'll hold a tray. What we want to do, if you have a deep tray, if you have a deep drawer like that, once you get above about an inch, everything underneath there gets lost and it's just a pain. So to make two drawers out of one, we put these slips in there so you can put a 1 inch deep tray on top of that which will essentially double the capacity, the useful capacity of the drawer. Now, what we're trying to figure out is how we can make it so that when these are in the closed position, right about there, we can lock them in place when these two doors close. And Kevin gave me a good idea with the magnets the other day, so we're going to see if we can get somewhere with that. And we don't want any kind of a, I didn't want to do this again with the finger recess. I wanted to have something a little different. So I found a ring pull, what is it called? A finger pull or ring pull? Remember?
A finger ring pull.
Finger ring pull. It's a fairly small diameter, so you bore a hole in there that doesn't go all the way through, and then that ring will lay flush, and you reach in and pull it to pull it out. So it's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want anything showing on the surface. So if you're interested in this, so we are building this in our online workshop, and you can get a membership to that and follow along. All right. Anything to bring up? If you guys, huh?
Should get going.
Oh, you should get going? So if you see any vets pop their head up, like, make sure. Sid's on?
Yeah.
Our Sid?
Our Sid, yeah.
Sid? Okay. I'm going to, this will apply to anything or any species of wood. I'm going to do a corner like this. I'm going to do a through dovetail. Now, I always like to make one piece thinner than the other or thicker than the other. I like the way it looks. It elongates the tail. So if you look at this drawer, you have a fairly long dovetail, and then you've got somewhat very short pins. And for whatever reason, I just like to look at that, but you don't have to do it that way. First thing we're going to do, and the first lesson to be learned here, is you must have everything perfectly square. So I don't trust the table saw to do the job that I need done. So I'm going to use my shooting board to shoot the long edges. And I'm going to lay one of those long edges against the fence, pull it out, the board out from the fence, and cut a little chamfer on that side. Then I'll flip it over like this, and I will continue to plane until that little chamfer disappears. And when it disappears, I should have a nice square edge that's square this way and square that way. But you know what? Let me just double check this. Make sure that blade is sitting in there, parallel to the sole. I would have liked I'm going to assume that we were just, so you'll look and see, I just cut a chamfer. You can see the color difference on the end of the walnut board. So I'm going to turn it this way so that that chamfer is on the far side. That's going to prevent wood from splitting off the end as I cross over. I'm going to take one more pass. I'll leave it at that. So there are the two pieces ready to go. I can get rid of the shooting board for now. I'm going to label these so that I don't pick up the wrong piece or cut on the wrong end. So I'm doing it like this. These two pieces are going to go together this way. So I'm just quick eyeball, see what this looks like. If one side had a defect, I would put it on the inside. So this is going to be my pin board. And because I wrote it like that, this is the joint, this is where the joint's going to be cut. And this, because it's wider, is going to be my tail board. And it'll go together like this. Okay, first thing I have to consider is I need to know how far down I'm going to cut into this piece, and I need to know how far down I'm going to cut into this piece. So I'm going to use something called a marking gauge. I'm working under the assumption that there's some novices on here tonight. So I'm going to take I need to take the thickness of the tailboard and put a line on the pin board that represents that thickness. So I'm going to set the board like so, loosen the knob, and the cutter drops down. Then I'll lock it. So now that cutter represents the thickness of this piece. And I'm going to take that dimension and I'm going to scribe a line across the outside and on the inside. I don't do the edges on this one. Then I'm going to take the pin board and do the same thing. Drop it down so I now have the thickness of the pin board registered on the marking gauge. And I'm going to do this to the tail board, but on this one I'm going to go all the way around. So front, edge, inside, and edge. Okay, there's those two pieces. Now, next thing I'm going to do is come in here and lay this out. Jake, why is that blade? If you've got time and you're not doing anything, it'd be nice if you could sharpen that blade for me. Look at the end of that piece of poplar. Ken, if you're ever looking for a pair of dividers, I have 19 pair in there. So here's the layout. This can get a little bit confusing. Once it settles in, you think, oh, that's so simple. First thing we're going to do, I need a sample dovetail. Have we got one kicking around?
Maybe in this
There's usually, oh, I know there's one out there. Thought there might be one here a little bit closer. Yeah. Nope. It's a half blind. Got one? No. Look on the bottom of there. Well, Jake's getting that. We are concerned about what we call the outside half pins. These are the two pieces that sit out here. This is awful small. And these half pins have no support on the outside of them. They're kind of holding the whole joint together. So they need to be a little beefier than the inside pins. And it's mostly a visual thing. So on something this size, meaning this joint is 4.5 inches wide, I am going to, I eyeball it, but I'll try to give you some advice. I'm going to set it to be right about there. So if I were to measure that and tell you it is it's 3/16 of an inch. So I'm going to put a mark there and a mark there. Yeah, I can use that. So I've got two little marks right there. I'm going to turn this around so that you can see I'm writing on the outside face. I'm going to use something called a dovetail marker. Jesse Ruffiange makes these for us now. So they're nice and accurate. And I'm going to use, I normally grab a red pen. I think I'm going to have to because that's all I have. And my dovetail marker allows me to get a square mark across the top, which will be across the end of the board, and then it's sloped. And there's two different slopes. There's a 1 in 6 slope that represents approximately 10 degrees, and there's a 1 in 7 slope that represents 8 degrees. I'm going to use 1 in 6 because I like that look. Put the pen in the hole that I just made with the divider, slide the gauge over. When it stops, I'll make sure that it's a very accurately drawn square mark on the end of the board. I flip this around like this so that I get the same angle on this side. Very accurate square mark here, and from the gauge line up. Those are my two outside half pins. I have to determine at this point how many tails do I want. So there's a joint that has 3 tails. Here's a joint that has 4 tails. You might actually accuse me of making that look a little bit too busy. Here's one that has, it's hard to see, but it has 3 tails. That call is yours. You don't want to have too many and it gets really busy and you actually make it a weak joint because you've removed so much of the white wood. Too few and you just don't have enough, glue surface. So on a joint this big, I'm going to go with 3. I'm going to save this divider setting so that when I do the other corner or the other corners, this dimension out here in the half pin will be the same. Take a second set of dividers, just kind of watching the clock, starting on the half pin. Should Jake be in closer?
Yeah.
Where is he? Jake? They're asking that you be in closer. All right, he's sharpening the blade for me, so I'll have to be very descriptive in my description. So the divider, the second pair of dividers, are ultimately going to represent one tail and one pin right out here. So if you look at that end, this dimension is going to have ultimately, and I say ultimately because I haven't determined it yet, it's going to represent one tail and one pin. So one dark piece and one white piece. This is probably the easiest way to teach it, but this isn't the way that I would actually do it, but it'll make sense. If I decide I'm going to put 3 tails in here, then I want to get close, and getting close means I want to divide the space between the half pins by 3. So very lightly, 1, 2. I didn't make it to that red line, so I've got to open them up a little bit. Try that again, starting on the red line, edge of the half pin. 1, 2, okay, there. That gives me 3 equal spaces. And if you think about it, I've laid out 3 equal spaces, but that does not allow for the pin. That just gives me 3 tails. So now what I have to do is I have to factor in the width of the pin. So when you look at this joint, you see these little white strips. That's the edge of the pin. That's what I'm referring to right now. And I've done everything from little wee skinny ones. I've done some that are so small they were just the width of the saw. I'm looking to see. None of them have survived. I never do them very big because a router can leave them can get down to 3/16 of an inch. And if you're going to make it look like a router did it, then use a router. So I always make them smaller than that. I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little, yeah, right around 1/8 of an inch. Here's how I determine that. I start there. I haven't changed the setting yet, but before I begin, I am going to. Let Jake pick up the camera and get a little bit closer. I can do that. Thank you. You've been requested. Or sequestered. Yeah. Well, we make up our own words, Moose. Hey, anybody on, Ken?
Jeff O'Connor and
Jeffrey is.
Ahmed's on.
Ahmed?
Jeff E.
Jeff E.
Jeffy.
Jeffy. O'Connor.
Kent Boys.
Hey, Kent. Kevin?
Kevin's on.
Okay, Kev. Is Jeff forcing Kim to watch? Poor Kim.
Jack Lane's on.
Hi, Jack.
Phil Lawrence is on.
Hey, Phil. I'm ready when you're ready, Jake. We're on pause, momentary pause for our cameraman / blade sharpener. I had to get him to do the 32-second sharp. So
shoot.
What?
Break.
You got fat?
No, I
Doesn't
hit
fit?
the off button.
So what does that mean?
It means
They can still hear you.
Oh, the video's off?
Yeah. We'll get it back in a second.
All right.
okay.
Tell me when we're back. This dimension on the dividers right now.
Are we back?
No.
We're not back.
There we go.
They're back. This dimension, now that you're a little bit closer, this dimension represents the half pin. Here and here. This dimension right now represents 3 equal spaces. From here, stepping over, not to leave any marks yet, I got 3 equal spaces. I need to factor in a pin, and I want it to be a relatively small pin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply open up my dividers a little bit. And now I'm going to do this again. And because I open them up, you know I'm going to cross over this line. The amount that I cross beyond that line will determine how big these inside pins are. So starting on the half pin, I go 1, 2. That leaves me a pin that's just the size I want. If I wanted it bigger, I'd open these up. If I wanted it smaller, I'd close these down, remembering that any adjustment I make gets multiplied by the number of times I step. So, liking what I have, I'm going to now come in and leave a mark. Don't make it too deep, but you do want to be able to see it. And then over here, I step out, get on the line, leave a mark, leave a mark. Now, using that same 1:6 ratio, put the pen in the hole, bring the gauge over to it, and make sure you have a very accurate square mark. And then from the gauge line up, don't go to the next one, but go to the one beyond that I cannot see. There it is right there. Square my line, come up, then flip it around and do the same thing coming back. Make sure that is an accurately squared line. Imperative. Nice thing about this setup is that could be 50 feet long. Everything will be perfectly symmetrical, and there's the key to having the other three corners look the same. My layout is right there. Okay, now next thing I'm going to do is get some of this yellow automotive refinish masking tape, and Ken's son actually turned us onto this, and it has completely replaced my need for using the skew block plane. And I'll show you. I like this tape because it's a little bit stickier and it's a little thicker than regular painter's masking tape. So I just crossed over the line. My gauge line is right there. I put a little bit over the gauge line. Most of it's down on this side of the gauge line. I'm going to lay down 4 pieces. Now I want to make sure that that's well stuck. Then I'll use my my little handy Tajima knife to come in here and cleanly cut that off. Flip it over and do the other side. Take my marking gauge, hopefully it's still set at the same setting. Come in here and I'm going to make multiple passes through that tape. Then I'll just peel that off carefully. Okay. Now that's going to give me a little wall, so when I set the tailboard after I've made these cuts, it's going to line these 2 pieces up perfectly. You'll see what I mean. Now the next thing I highly recommend you do is come in and identify which side of each of these lines you're going to cut on. Any questions, Frick? You're not asking.
Luther just put out a thing
What?
asking for questions, so he'll forward them to me.
John
There-
Beck is, oh, sorry, John Beck is on. June 23rd.
Hi, John. Yeah, I remember Santa Claus. Different Santa Claus.
Jeff says that ball and chain Kim O'Connor is with us too.
Hi, Kim. I liked your video you did today from the painted tree. Okay, time to cut. So I'm going to take, so you won't think that I'm using some super duper saw, although I am. I'm going to take a new one fresh out of the box. Who made this, Ken?
Ian,
Ian? Suppose Ian's home watching? No? Normally I have a pair of scissors to do this, but I'll use my little trusty knife wherever I put it.
Just separate it like a.
Yeah, I never get it to do that. It
Ziploc
always rips.
Does it matter how many pins, or is it just personal preference? That's from Brent.
Personal preference, but there is a little bit to consider. Too many pins and it's really busy and you actually weaken the tailboard because you've removed so much material and it looks really busy. Too few pins and you don't have enough glue surface to make for a strong joint. So there is a balance, and that's something you'll just decide on your own. Anything under 4 inches in width, 3 usually seems to be the magic number, 3 tails that is. And then over that, it's just, like I said, it's your call. Now I want to make sure this board is standing plumb in the vise, and that way I benefit from the fact that when I pick up my saw, because of the way it's made, it registers in my hand the same way every time. We got little finger recesses in there. Index fingers and thumb sit like this, not down here. This gives it lots of stability. If you're holding it like that, you don't have that. But index finger here and thumb there, lots of stability, lots of weight. The first 2 inches have little tiny teeth that are cut back with a negative cutting angle. Makes it really easy to go in and start the cut. The rest of the saw has 15 teeth per inch with a 0-degree cutting face. Makes it very aggressive. I want to cut right down to the line. I don't want to go below it because it'll show up as a mark. And I don't want to stop shy of it because it'll make me have to go in and do a lot of extra work.
You don't want to stop short.
No, do not stop short. That's Frank's move. Okay, we're going to stay on the waist side, meaning these little candy stripes. I'm going to be cutting on the candy stripe side of that line. So I set this up very comfortably. I'm just barely holding the saw, very light grip. Use my index finger and thumb to create an anchor point by pinching the wood. Press my saw against them, and then I can play back and forth off of each other to get that into position where I want it. When I'm looking on the right side of the blade, all I see is the pen mark. I don't see wood and then the pen, and I don't see a partial pen mark. I see all the pen mark. That way I know that I'm square, because that line is square. That's the reason I told you, make sure when you do that, that you make accurate lines. So holding that in position, cut right down to the line. Go to the next one. Line it up so that my saw blade is parallel to that red line. Start my cut. I'm already committed on the angle. You cannot make alterations to the angle once you've started. So at this point, I'm holding my saw at the angle that I intend. And if I was to go in there and check it, that's pretty close. Slow down as you get toward the bottom so that you don't go too low. Now I've got to go the other direction. The only thing's going to be different is my thumb's in the way, so I've got to pull my thumb back, but I bring it back here and help it anchor that index finger. I press the saw laterally against the index finger, and again I play off of each other until I get that saw exactly where I want. Always wiping the sawdust out of the teeth so that when I set it down, it doesn't obscure my line. Final cut. Line everything up. Saw is parallel. You go in close. You see what I mean by saw being parallel to the knife, to the pen line? Slow down at the end. You want to make sure that those cuts go right to the line. If you stop short, you will create a lot of extra work. Okay, I can take that off. Now, they look good. I gotta get rid of this fuzz on the back side so that it'll lay in there properly, or it'll lay on the pin board properly. I'll just scrape that off. Okay, my next move is to take my pin board with the outside facing me. I'm going to need my plane.
Hey, why don't you put a piece of that yellow tape on the face right now
Yellow tape on the face of one.
of the pin board for when you cut
Oh, so I can see it, you mean?
it? Yeah.
All right, so what Jake is suggesting is as we get a little older, really old, it gets hard to see those lines, especially on dark wood. So I found that if you put a piece of that yellow tape on there, this is all worth the extra time because it results in more accurate cuts. So what I'm doing is just trimming this on the edge. Now, I always like to have 2 marking gauges. I should have mentioned that. I'm going to take this marking gauge and I'm going to reset it to the thickness of the tail board because that's what gets marked onto the pin board. And then I'm going to go in and I'm just going to trim that at the bottom and then remove it. So this is going to give me a nice yellow canvas that I can draw my marks on. It'll make it very easy to see. I want to have the pin board flush with the top of the plane, held firmly in the vise. Make sure that's flush. Push this back, and I'm going to create a bridge. And that those 4 pieces of tape are going to act as a great reference so that when I pull this thing up, this stays flush just exactly where it should be. If you didn't do that, you'd be sitting here like this using your thumbs trying to keep it in place or get it in place. But with the method that we're going to use, you're going to see how valuable that is. Ken, would you grab me a Sean shim, please, because I only have the small one. I don't know. I think it may be out in the other tool cabinet.
Right here, Ken. In his portable one.
Oh, never mind. It's in the back. I got it. Sorry. So Sean McDermott, combat wounded vet, came to our class. Huh?
Grab your knife.
Oh yeah. Sean McDermott came to our class in 2017. And Sean, during the dovetail process, made a little jig for do this offset that we're about to do. And a few years later, we took his idea and we turned it into a very valuable tool. We call it the Sean shim. Sean gets a royalty off of it. And you notice at the end there are 4 numbers, 24, 25, 26, and 23. Should have started on 23. So that means that little offset right there is 26 thousandths of an inch. This little offset is 25, this one's 24, this one's 23. And what we're going to do is use a principle that was taught by
Ernest Joyce.
Ernest Joyce back in the book that he wrote called Encyclopedia of Furniture Making back in 1971. And I'm just taking it a little bit farther, make it a little bit easier to do. So my saw kerf on that brand new saw is 24 thousandths of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the tailboard to my left 24 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to do it by using the offset right here. So I'm going to set it right like there, put this on here, slide it over, and if you look down here, that offset is the thickness of the saw blade. Okay, now before I do that, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to put a T with a circle. And that represents the tail, so I'm not confused on which part I'm talking about. So when I reference tail, I'm talking about these 3 pieces right now. So I just move my tailboard to my left by 24 thousandths of an inch. So because I moved this to my left, I'm going to go to the right side of the tail. And I'm going to put my saw kerf, now my saw blade. Now that little blade that's in my dovetail marking knife is 24 thousandths of an inch. It's the same as the saw blade. So when it fits down in there, it doesn't slide side to side. And I'm going to use that to go in, and then I'm going to drag it through. I'm dragging it through the end grain of the pin board, this piece underneath. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm reaching down in and I'm dragging it through. You don't have to pull too hard, but multiple times just makes the slot that you're going to leave a little bit deeper, a little easier to cut, a little easier to start to cut. Okay, now I've got to do the other side. So I'm going to take my Sean shim, I'm going to turn it this way so the narrow one is on the top. I'm going to set it right here, and I'm going to move the tailboard over. I always like to move it over a little bit farther and then push it back, so I know that the overhang is now 24 thousandths of an inch. I just move my tailboard to my right, so I'm going to go to the left side of each tail, reach down, and pull it through. And then do the same thing here. And the last one. Okay, lift that off. And I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 saw kerfs that very accurately and conveniently are the exact same width as the saw blade. Now, Jake's idea to put that tape on early might not have been a good thing because it pulled off when I was dragging the knife through. But I'm going to use my dovetail marker, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to draw a line, And I'm drawing that line to be on this side, the pin side of that mark I just made.
The keep sign.
I'm going to do the same thing on this one. This one I'm marking on this side. This one I'm marking on this side of that mark. Do this, repeat it on each one. I really wouldn't have, if I did it again, I'd put the tape on last, simply because it got pulled off from the knife and now it's not going to be as accurate. Well, yeah, it is not going to be as accurate. It's pulling off. Okay, I'm going to put an X on the parts that are going to be removed, and I'll also do it down here. Now this one is considerably easier because you don't have to worry about starting it. You already have it started. I want to make sure the board is standing plumb, so I'm putting my square on there. Push everything back out of my way. Take my dovetail saw, and I'm going to set my dovetail saw right in that kerf and start my cut. Now on this side, I'm following the line. You want to come around real quick and have a peek at this. You'll see what I mean. I made it so that the ink line stayed with the half pin, and I made my cut right down the face of it. If you put the line in the middle of the curve, you're going to cut through it, and then you don't have a reference. You've lost it. So I'm going to move over to this one. The only part you want to be really careful is starting it. You want to be in. You want to be in that curve. See what I mean by that tape falling off? And then this one. Now, what I should tell you about dovetails is this. These don't matter. The angles can be off a few degrees one way or the other. They must be square across the end, but nothing else matters. What matters is this is the template. That has to fit this. So as long as you get these cut square across the end, don't worry, don't fret about the angles. Eventually you're going to want to get them right because it looks better. But as far as how it's going to go together, that's not an issue. Now I'm going to go the other way, set my saw in the kerf. I actually put my mark on the wrong side, but I was still able to follow it. This one. And the last one. Right down to the bottom of the tape. Okay? Now, if I had one where I'd left a little bit of the line on, or I sloped a little bit, I could come in and I could use the saw to trim it. Now I'm actually going to do this, but I'm going to do it in the opposite direction. So I'm keeping this piece. I'm removing the part with the X. But had my cut I had made it off a little bit, I could go in here like this, lean the saw this way, and I could use the teeth to actually go in and pare down the side and fix that. I didn't have to do that, so no worries. This is the one that I didn't go quite deep enough. There. Okay, I'll leave those marks on there so I can follow them with my fret saw. So this tool is a wasting tool, meaning it's just used to remove waste. It's not a finished cut, so I don't spend a lot of money on this saw. It's just there to prevent me from having to chisel all this out. I find it a lot easier to saw than to chisel. So I'm going to drop this down. Now, just so you'll know, you would think, well, how am I going to get over here if that throat is only 3 inches? When I put my blade in, I grab a pair of, how am I doing for time? Oh, I'm good. When I put my blade in and it cuts on the pull stroke, meaning it's designed to cut as I pull the saw toward me, then the teeth are awful hard to see, so the best way to do that is just you put your thumb on there and you can feel which way you have. Now I can run it this way, but I can't run it that way, so obviously I'm cutting on the pull. After I've secured it in the 2 clamps, I grab it right here and I twist it about 30 degrees like that, and then 30 degrees up here. Now, when my saw makes a level cut, the frame is actually going to be up here because now the blade is level. So I'm not restricted at all. I can cut as far as I need to. The blade is 12.5 teeth per inch. So it's the biggest blade or the coarsest, fastest cutting blade I can get that will still fit down that kerf. And I don't want to mess anything up with that kerf because this side, I'm pointing at this side. This side of this half pin is part of a glue joint. So I want that to be as flat and as smooth as possible, because the better and flatter and smoother it is, the better the joint's going to be. So I don't want to mess anything up. So when I do this, I turn my blade, my frame over, drop down to the bottom, come just off of the bottom a little bit, turn the saw, and I'm going to cut as close as I can get to that yellow, the bottom of that tape. The closer I get, the less I have to chisel. Do it again. Lay it over, drop it down, come up off the bottom, turn it a little bit, which has a tendency to keep it from sliding up or down. Just a straight pull.
Angle it at the end.
Yeah, the opening in the back is narrower than the opening at the front. So I start like this if you're looking in plan view, and I have to swing around and finish like that in order to prevent cutting off one of my valuable pins. Go to the bottom. Don't worry about being fast, but you'll eventually get to the point where you can whip through those pretty quick. In the beginning, you might want to go slow so you can get a little more control. Right, done. Now, I'll just peel this off real quick. And some may say, what a waste of time with the yellow tape. Well, you know what? You can do a lot better work when you can see it. So if it takes a few minutes and wastes a little bit of tape, I'm good. I'll go ahead and chop that out, but I'll do all my sawing first. Nice part about this process, if I were to have screwed that up and I looked and said, oh shoot, that's not right, I can always, this is the reason why I always process this one first, I could always come in and do another set of pins off of this set of tails. But once I've removed the waste on this one, I'm committed. So I'm thinking this is good. So now I'm going to come in. I may as well take that tape off now. I can see this one. Put that in place. Same thing, we're going to remove the waste, go down to the bottom, come just off. Lay that on its side. Now, you'll see my racing stripe on my bench. I use that as a visual guide to help get a piece of wood in there and get it level. Otherwise, I'd be having to put a level on it. And again, this is because I'm going to make a plumb cut. If my ability to make a plumb cut can be done by feel, this piece has to be level in order for it to work. Before I make this cut, I'm going to come in here with a chisel, starting in the waist, and I'm going to make a little angled cut into that marking gauge mark. And then I'll remove that. And what that does, it provides me a little shoulder. No questions, Frick? No, wow. Quiet night. Now, I'm resting my saw blade up against that shoulder.
Here's one. You listening?
Yeah.
Why do you hold your hand behind the tailboard when removing the waste?
Why do I hold my hand behind the tailboard when I'm removing the waste? Oh, you know what? People have asked me about that before. I didn't even realize it, but I subconsciously, not subconsciously, no, although I don't think about it, when I'm making the cut, the end of the saw just kind of touches my finger and it seems to give me that level point. So you're not cutting like this, you're not cutting like that. So I've done that for a long time. I don't even realize I do it, but that is the reason.
What's the difference between a shooting board and a hook board?
And a bench hook?
No, he said a hook board.
I don't know what a hook board is. It's probably a South Carolina shooting board.
Luther will know.
Luther would know. Okay, come in here, lay up against that little knife wall. Now, when you look on this side, it's real easy to tell whether or not you're square. Can you get in there tight enough to see that, Jake? Mm-hmm. Do you see how I'm tight here, but there's a gap there? and the opposite. So I want to lay that so it's nice and tight. There. Okay, now we're going to hold this on an angle. It's always better if you let your bench be your third hand. That way you can have both hands behind the chisel edge. You're not going to cut yourself. Are chisels dangerous, Frick?
Can be.
In the wrong hands or into the wrong hand?
Hardy har.
Hardy har.
Well, chisels don't cut people. People cut people with chisels.
Yeah, that's like banning guns. We should ban chisels. Okay, I'm just coming in here and cleaning that up. Check to make sure I don't have material sitting above the scribe line. Flip it over and do the other side. My left hand anchors the chisel against the edge of the board, allowing me lots of control. Check that, make sure those cuts were good. Okay. Now, I need to use a 1/4 inch chisel to remove that waste. The bulk of it has come out with the fret saw. Now, I don't want to be pounding on my bench. Jake, what did I have the other day oh, that piece of pine. Oh, I can use this.
Is this a 17-degree application?
Yeah. Poplar is soft enough that you can use our 17-degree chisel on it. It just means that the bevel, the primary bevel is 17 degrees, and it makes for a very long, acute point, and it just works marvels on softer woods. Now, I've always started on the inside, finished from the face side. And Jake said to me the other day, he said, you've never had that issue. Well, it seems to be advantageous to start on the
Never had what issue?
face side. Well, I always worried about, this is always a two-step process. You chop halfway, you chop the other half. If you chop and you break through and the chisel comes out the other side, damaging that surface, I'd rather it damage the inside than the show side. Well, we've never done that. The problem we have run into is the fibers breaking in the middle between the tails and being really close to the surface. You plane it off to clean it up, and all of a sudden you see this translucent area. So to avoid that, Jake decided for me to try starting, how's Romper Room? Starting from the face side, keep the chisel standing plumb, go down a little better than halfway.
Wow, you ran rampant with those lines.
With what?
Your pen lines.
Yeah, I couldn't see. Could not see. Now I'm finishing from the inside. Just tap carefully, don't go hog wild. Tap down until you meet the first cut. Now, working from the face side, I'm going to come in here. Again, this is one of those situations where you could put it in the vise if you wanted. But I'm looking in here closely. I want these corners to be nice and clean. I don't want any debris in there that's going to affect how the joint goes together. I see that corner's clean, I see this corner's clean, and this corner's pretty clean. That's the big advantage to taking your saw cut right to the base. If you stop shy, you now have to come in there with your chisel and literally carve out that corner. That could add an extra 5 or 10 minutes to that joint. Instead, I saw right and I stopped at the line. I sawed down, I stopped at the line. I removed the material in between and then chiseled between the two saw cuts, and I'm done. So much easier. Now, before we let go of this, I'm going to take my chisel, choke up, and I'm going to start just inside the edge. Just inside the end. And then I'm going to take a little chamfer. I'm doing this on the inside of the board. This is the show side, this is the inside. And I'm doing this down here, not across here. And that is going to allow the joint to go together a little bit easier. It'll also help distribute the glue properly. Now I'm just clipping these off. Okay, so that joint is ready to go together minus the glue. Now, we'll come in here with the pin board. Because this is a hardwood, I'm going to switch chisels, and I'm going to use something with a little more of a robust edge.
The 5/8 was sharp.
The 5/8. I'll show you what I mean. Compare the two. Well, there's 2 1/2-inch chisels. You see the difference in the length of the bevel? This is 25. This is 17. And it was discovered accidentally that at 17 degrees, it allowed it to cut more cleanly
Not accidentally.
on small fibers. Which 5/8 is sharp?
I didn't realize it were two.
That one looks like somebody's been scraping glue with it. Try this one. Okay. Oh, I hate having to use that. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to get rid of a little bit of this material that was left from the saw. Then I'm going to set my chisel in the gauge line, right up next to the pin. Hold it plumb. Then I'm going to come to the other side. So I'm right up next to the pin. Start chopping, and as I'm chopping, I'm going to angle it to follow the slope of the pin. And it was just a little bit too narrow to get all of it. I'll do this again. So if you look here closely, any excess, I shouldn't say any excess, any and all material on the waist side of this gauge line will push on the bevel, trying to force the chisel back this way. If you breach that line, it just shows up terribly. So what I try to do is saw very close, and if I didn't saw close enough, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to make a little light chop like that. Now, when I set my chisel in the gauge line, it's going to get down into the wood enough to support the chisel edge before the pressure caused by that waste builds up enough that it could impact the chisel and push it behind my gauge line. Another little quick remedy that only takes a few seconds, but it'll save you a lot of grief. And if you have a good marking gauge line, you just simply drag the chisel until you feel it drop into the gauge
That
line.
last socket could have gone a little deeper.
Could have, but it didn't. Now we're on the inside, same idea. You want to be careful. You don't want any debris stuck between your backup block and your piece. You'll leave a big dent if you do. Now, you want to make sure you do not leave a hill in here. So when you're chiseling, you either want to be standing plumb or slightly undercutting. I say slightly because you take that to the extreme, you're going to be in trouble. So I set my chisel in there. I always chop, never in this direction, but always in this direction, because I can see plumb. And I've done this enough, and it doesn't take long before you've done it enough that you can tell you're standing plumb. There we go. Now put this in the vise, again, that third hand. I'm going to grab a narrower chisel just because it's easier to push through the end grain. I want to make sure these corners are nice and clean. So I'm holding the chisel with my left hand, and I've got it secured against the face of the board. So it can't get out of control, and I can push as hard as I need to, but it's all under control. You got to be a control freak. Other words, you go sailing out through the back and you take a big chunk off with you. You don't want that. And you have to sell it as a second or maybe a tenth. When you're making blaster boxes, they've got to be perfect. Or dovetail dog trays, feeders. Okay, I want these to be flat, so I'm going to take my square, I'm going to set it on there like that, and I'm going to move it forward and back. And if it rocks on a high spot, I know I got an issue. Oh, look at this. See that, rocking? This one, no rock. This one, right there. And I can see what's happened. Those fibers have when I chopped, they broke, they bent, and then they broke, and then they sprung back. And in that springing back, they're sitting up above the surface. So this material in here is not necessary for the strength of the joint. So I don't worry about undercutting some of that, but I do worry about it sticking up because it would prevent the joint from closing. And this one's nice and clean. Okay, let's have a quick look at this. Everything looks good. Okay, put this in the vise, hold it securely. Now we're going to put this together. We want to make sure that we have everything that we need. Bottom
left.
When the glue is drying and the wood is swelling because of the moisture in the glue, that's
Bottom
not
left?
What?
Bottom left drawer.
That's not the time to start looking for clamps or other things that you're going to need. I'll leave this over here. Put all these away. Any questions while I'm tidying up, Frick?
Nope.
Is there anybody on?
Nope.
Huh? 543 people, and there's not a question among them. I
Well,
must
there's
be a
Well,
lots
good
there could be
instructor.
questions, but Luther's
Slow?
on.
Oh, Luther's answering them? We'll let a few slide through just so I know somebody's out there.
Yeah, Luther. Say something for the rest of us.
Come on, Luther, you hog.
Somebody asked earlier how you.
Put your 4.5 away.
Chisel you use.
Which chisel I used.
Which width chisel is the best for doing the hip replacement?
I'm sorry, Ken, say that again, please.
Which width?
Oh, for what?
Getting rid of the width.
That's it.
Chopping the width.
Oh, well, that's totally dependent upon the size of the... Actually, I can take that a little bit farther. The more times, I wouldn't use a 1/4 inch to cut an area that's an 1 1/4 inch wide, because you're going to have to step it over at least 5 times. Every time you step it over, you risk having it misalign, and now you leave a divot. So,
But you wouldn't use a 1 inch for that socket.
probably not. The wider the chisel, the more it's cutting, the harder you have to hit it. So the rule that I always follow when I'm woodworking with hand tools is this. It's all about control. So the less effort has to be applied, the more control you have. The more control you have, the better will be the results. So if you're trying to drive a big wide chisel down through a piece of maple, you're wailing on that thing, you don't have much control. I'd much rather use a 5/8 inch chisel. Might have to step 1 or 2 times more, but I'm not going to have to hit it as hard because it's not cutting through as much material. Is Michael on? Michael, the gentleman the father that we are doing this for.
Maybe he's just not in the chat, but now that you mention it, he might.
Is Wayne on? Tell him I grew my hair just for this occasion.
Michael Glacier?
I don't know Michael's last name.
There is a Michael.
The Michael for whom we are doing this. See if he tells us.
Just tell him to mention that in the chat.
So Michael, if you're on, the Michael that who is making the urn for his young child, just let us know so we can give you a shout out. I'm not stalling, I'm just trying to clean up a little bit so we don't have so much stuff in the way. Now, when it comes time to assembling, you got a couple of options. You can put it together with a rubber mallet, or you can use a steel hammer. We'll demonstrate both. I'll tell you why I like one, or why I've kind of switched and I use one more than I used to. That being the rubber mallet. He's there? Hi, Michael. Glad you could join us. Glad we could help you with this. Anything to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, so.
John Beck says that both Wayne and Michael are here.
Yep.
Wayno?
Lousteau, right?
Wayne Lousteau, yeah.
Yeah, they're both
Wayne
here.
long hair.
Wayne Long, yeah. Wayne, I don't know if he still is, but at one point he was the youngest franchisee of the entire Woodcraft franchise.
Younger than Ryan?
Younger than Ryan, yeah, I think. Ryan Balls. Okay, got my glue. I'm using Type Bond 3. No particular reason why, other than the fact that it adds it adds the fact that it's waterproof to the benefit. I've got my little spatula. I prefer to use a spatula rather than a brush because I can be very specific where I get the glue. I've got my square to check it to make sure that it is. I'm going to grab a small clamp. Sometimes you're going to want to squeeze those half pins together. And I like these little small Bessies because they've got a little small foot so I can get in there.
Danny Bell is here.
Hey, Danny boy. D. Bell, down in Maine. Just got a job. Did you hear that? He's got a job as a carpenter for, I think, the state of Maine Parks and Recreation.
Does that
So
mean
you want to be careful the next time you park yourself on a Maine state
Does that mean he's staying
picnic
in Maine?
table. What?
Does that mean he's staying in Maine? Wasn't he leaving?
He is for at least the next year.
He's staying in Maine.
Yay.
He can't leave us. He's a northeasterner now. Once it's in your blood, it's always there. Like, am I forgetting anything, Jake? Oh yeah, block. So sometimes you're going to want a block to tap that together, and folks make the mistake of pounding through the block the wrong way. So I'll show you the correct way. Got to find a piece of wood that is worthy of it.
Any tulip wood over there?
Huh?
Any tulip wood?
Who used that? Wait.
Another John.
Another what?
Another John.
Another John? Yeah. Tulip wood is rather expensive, and somebody was using, and when I say rather expensive, it's probably about $80 or $90 a board foot.
He's a good friend of ours, so we were okay with it, but we weren't going to
Which
hand it
John?
anymore. From Memphis?
John, that came in the camper?
Starts with, no. His last name starts with a D. I don't know if he wants it.
Oh, he doesn't want to be named? You should have told me that before I started talking about him. All right, I don't want to use a great big piece like this, but I've got a block like that. My point is this: you want to pound down through the end grain, not, hear the difference? Better transmission of power pounding down through the end grain. And what I want it to be narrow enough that if I have to, I can get right in next to the pins to seat that. But since I set my marking gauge to be the thickness of this, I should be able to, that'll be flush, and I shouldn't have to do that. There are times when you may have to. Okay, ready to go?
Yeah.
I can't drag this out any further. A little bit of glue, and we're going to glue all the long grain surfaces. In this case, we're doing the pin board. And you notice how neat I am being, because I don't want to be having to get glue off of surfaces after the fact. Now, on the tailboard, I'm going to do the same thing. So I glue all of the mating surfaces. And you have to make sure that you put glue everywhere you want it. It's not going to get there on its own. You can't just
Do you
put a little...
need to be gluing both surfaces?
Yep. Don't start any rumors. And I put a little bit on the end grain shoulders out there, just for good measure. Now, when you put it together, you want to start it by hand first. You want to start wailing on it with a hammer until you know it's lined up. So I'll do it by hand.
Get a rag?
You can use
Grab that rag right there in front of the
you
box.
can use a rubber mallet. But what you want to be aware of is if one's a little bit tight, one's a little bit loose, and you whack this, it may very well run a split up there, which is one of the reasons why I always like using a block that was the full width. That way when you're pounding it, the entire joint is going together at the same time and you don't run that risk. And that is a very real risk. Now, if I needed to, if I looked and I said, oh, wait a minute, this is not down tight. If you start pounding here and the glue's already starting to tack, you may very well cause that piece to pop up. So I go right over tight to the pin. So when I'm pounding, it's taking all of the wood.
All of the tail.
All of the white wood. Now, check it over here. We want to make sure that it's seated. Check it for square. It needs to come up just a little bit. Oh, I went up too far. Okay, down tight. Anytime I do that, I always like to give it a little tap. Now, another way you can do it too is you can put it together like this and then pound on it, and that ensures that it all goes down at the same time and you won't run that risk. Now, and by the way,
Are you not gonna?
what I meant was if you need to, you can put these small clamps in here like so and just give that a squeeze. You'll see some squeeze out pop up. And if you've got a bit of a gap, that'll take care of it. I'm not going to bother with it.
Would you be more likely to do that if the pin board was a softwood?
Yeah, maybe. You can't, that won't cover all sins, but if it's just a matter of just enough pressure that it caused those outside half pins to splay a little bit, you can bring them back in. Now, get that blade parallel to the sole, then retract it. Little wax on the sole to cut the friction. Wonder where that came from. A little shameless commercial there. Now, if your pins are sticking up high, flush them off first. If not, the plane is being held up by the pin. Out here, you start to remove this material, and by the time you get the pin flush, you've created a taper on there. So if your pins are high, take them down with little short strokes first. Now I also want to keep this board uniform thickness, so you take off a complete pass on the left, a complete pass in the middle, and a complete pass on the right. Complete pass? Chewing my words. I'm feeling for plane tracks. Got one right there. Got one right there. I'm going to do that again. It's a much lighter pass.
Miguel Miller from the May.
Pardon?
Miguel Miller from the May 20 this year class.
Michael Miller
Oh, Mike.
from Arizona.
Howdy, Mike. Okay, no plane tracks. Now you'll notice that you can see marking gauge lines. I don't like that at all. If I'm doing something, I'll make a very, very light pass so that it's not hard to get rid of. In other words, you've got quite a bit of planing to do in order to get rid of them, which you may or may not be able to have the allowance for. Some people think, oh, it looks cool. I don't. It looks terrible. I think it looks terrible. It never shows well. You put a stain on, you put a finish on it, and it depending how deep it is, it'll look light or dark. Just not a good sight. Now, for some reason, I set my marking gauge a little bit less because the walnut is sticking up, so I gotta have a little bit extra material to get rid of here. And I'm running my fingers over there so that I don't take off more than I have to. I'm still a little bit proud. And your guide is just keep planing until you start to remove poplar, which I am now. Ken, would you grab your container of tung oil for me? Yeah, I gotta get you a new one. Now, I've got that retracted.
Why don't you just throw some wax on it?
No, I'm gonna put some tung oil on. Now we want to flush these up. Which one? I think the walnut is sticking up just a little bit proud. Let's flush.
We got a question from Sue B.
Hey, Sue.
She says, do you think that exposed pins are worth the effort for the look?
Exposed pins?
Yeah. You think it's worth the effort for the look?
Well, actually, it's less effort because it's easier to do through dovetails than it is to do half blinds. So what Sue's talking about is, what?
Is she talking about that, or is she talking about proud dovetails?
Ask her.
I would assume it's like the ones you did on Super Days.
Oh,
Yeah, proud.
yeah. Okay, so do I have any example here? We got anything? I got a box that I did?
Yeah, that isn't that brown oak one?
Brown oak.
The brown oak writing desk or whatever.
Oh, where's that?
It's either in here
Ken,
or out there.
would you go over there where all my boxes are?
We'll check here
And that
first,
little
Ken.
writing box, it's made out of white oak.
No, never mind. There's nothing in there.
It's about this big, and that tall. It's made out of white oak.
Brown oak, isn't it?
No. Well, the lid may be English brown oak.
Luther says she's talking about pins and tails that stand proud.
Yeah, that's what we're going to show her. Okay, so
Yes,
have a quick look at this.
I see a gap right there.
There.
Show you.
Jake will put 100 power magnification on
Right
it.
there. See that? That cut went too low. Don't make the same mistake, folks.
I see a couple little corners missing there.
Ooh.
Jeff
right?
told me to do that. That may be my chamfer, but I can't imagine it.
No, no. There was fiber up on top of the pin.
Oh yeah, detective. Now, I'm going to put a little oil on it, make it stand out. I need a little brush. Now, I'll open up to some questions, so tell Luther to hold it. Let them come through.
You had two out there.
Oh, yeah, I
Forgot
did.
about
Oh,
the
good,
cherry
thanks.
one.
Ken. So this is what Sue was asking me about. You see how we left these proud? That is a major pain in the butt. This box has been around a long time. I think I built this in 1988. It's been repaired a few times. The lid had to be replaced.
Weren't there little trays in it?
Nope. So the problem here is you have to pre-finish everything. So this has to be finished, this has to be finished, all the pieces have to be finished because after you put it together, you can't plane it flush. So all of this has to be done. You got to cut your little chamfers, and if you go below, it looks like a gap, so you can't make your chamfer go too far down the side of the pins and tails. You be really careful when you're gluing it, because imagine trying to go in and get glue out of one there. It would be a nightmare. So it's a lot of work. I would say it's quadruple the work, maybe even more. Now, I'm just going to put some finish on this so we can see how it stands out. We can get this thing open. Any questions coming through, Frick? I'm not a big fan of poplar, if you saw one of the last YouTubes that we've done.
What's your favorite oil finish to use?
This one. This is a tung oil product. It's not pure tung oil, but it's made by circa 1850. Readily available up here. It is available in the U.S., but not terribly easy to find, I don't think. So when you put a bit of, see what happens to the marking gauge lines? Look at that. Light, dark, dark. It never looks right. Never. Even if you went back over and did it to get them all the same depth, it always looks like, what's that doing there? So if you ever see it on my furniture, that's an error.
That's funny.
What?
It's right there.
Yeah, that's an error. Why do you think I didn't sell that box? Smart aleck. I hate that rag. Where's my... Huh? Smelly. Go over to Frick when he's making beef stew. Come to think of it, I wish I had done the wax. Okay. The more I look at that marking gauge, the more I'm emphatic about removing it or making it very, very light so it's easy to remove. Okay, questions? None? Well,
Give it a sec.
hi. I'm going to put this saw. Ken, did you bring me a Sharpie?
Yeah.
Where is it?
I set it on the bench.
Oh, can you get a bigger one?
Get him one of those palette markers.
No, I don't want a palette marker. I want a regular Sharpie. I'm just going to clean this off. And I'm going to sign this saw. Put it back in the case. I wrote family first on there. Put it back in this sleeve. I'm going to take this box. And I'm going to write on this box to Michael in memory of Jackson. Family first. And Michael, you make sure we get your address, and that will be in the mail for you as a gift from us to you on Monday morning. It's been used once. We'll call it tested. All right, Ken, will you make sure that happens?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, any questions, or am I getting the night off early? How many people we get on?
566.
Are we getting any donations for the Purple Heart Project?
Yeah, we were around 2,000 about half an hour ago.
That's
I'll
good.
get,
So we're going to give away, we're giving away a couple of gifts tonight. So for every $1,000, we're going to give away a nice prize. One of the ones we're giving away tonight is this really nice leather apron made by Rick Elder, combat wounded vet down in Maine. Sorry, it's a little bit dusty, but it's actually nice and clean. Or it's actually nice and new. What would an apron be without some sawdust on it? It's really heavy duty, did a nice job. PHP, and that's the state of Maine, in case you're wondering what that little is. So we'll give away that tonight. And then depending on how many other gifts we have, we'll give away some other prizes. Actually, you know what? Tonight we'll give away one of our new saws. So if you're not aware, we just released, actually about a month ago, our new panel saws. We have both crosscut and rip. So there's the nice logo up higher. This is a 9-point crosscut. Cuts like a dream. Ian and I have been working on these for the last month. We built about 500, Jake? No,
What?
not 500. How many have we made? 300?
250.
No, get out of here. We sold 160 right away. 300, Ken? 300. And we have some in inventory now. So if you're looking for a dandy saw, the other one, if I didn't mention it already, is a 7-point rip. I can never get those guards on. Okay, what else are we doing? Questions? I'm sitting here begging for questions on dovetails. Should be something.
Must have covered it good.
Rick?
I'm looking. Like Wayne says thank you.
Wayne, my friend, my pleasure. Anything we can do to lighten Michael's load at this time, you know what? It's, we do it. Is that it?
Well, we're
We're off early.
Gonna do the draw.
Yeah, let's do the draw. How many gifts are we given?
We're at 1980 according to Luther, so I'm sure
1980. Come on, somebody get us up over 2,000 so we can give away. So we can give away a $275 saw and I don't know what Rick charges for that apron, but it must be at least that much. Ken, anything left to talk about dovetails? I'll show you a couple. I'll just highlight a few. If you've been on here before, you've seen them. So the very first time we taught a class of combat wounded vets, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what their level of competency was going to be. And I typically, when I teach dovetails to a class of newbies, it's 3 or 4 or 5 hours into it before they get to a point where they can actually complete the joint, meaning they have to be able to make certain cuts correctly before they can proceed. Well, one of the first big tests is you've got to be able to make all 6 cuts on the tailboard and have them square across the end. And use it.
Mrs. Claus has donated $1,000.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Mrs. Claus. I'm sure Mr. Claus is on there as well.
Yeah, where's his 1,000?
Yeah. That was Jake. Smart aleck. Anyway, so we have, normally it's 10 tries before the guys actually get a joint so that all 6 cuts are right, meaning they get 4 or 5, cut it off, start over, and they keep going. So this guy's in my class. His name is Philip Gustafson, wounded vet from New York. And 15 minutes into it, he says, okay, I'm done. And I remember thinking to myself, whatever. And I go down and I look and I said, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with this guy now? He actually did it. So I said, okay. So anyway, fortunately, he screwed up by cutting off the tails. So he had to start over. So this was his second joint. And if you were to look at it closely, it's perfect. I can't really critique it and say this is wrong or that is wrong. So he gave it to me, allowed me to put it up on my wall. So that's Philip Gustafson. And in the same class was Marshall Rommel. And Marshall's was, he may not have been the first one, but his was joint, first ever dovetail was right spot on. So anybody can do this. You do need the right tools. I'm not going to give you another sales pitch on my saw, but the saw accounts for 70% of your ability to complete the joint. If the saw is working properly, it'll give you a flat, smooth side. If you can start it accurately, you won't have to do anything to the cuts after the fact. That's a big deal. If you make a cut and you have to go in now and play with a chisel in order to fix it, your chance of success really start to nosedive. So if your saw will allow you to start it accurately and make that cut, the straighter the cut, the smoother and flatter the sidewall is, the better will be the joint.
Mr. Claus kicked in $1,000 that Jake mentioned.
He said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of myself."
Thank you, Santa. Santa and Mrs. Claus have been, they were the reason, one of the main reasons I started this whole thing. They were the first ones to jump in. I'd known them a year before Jesse came into my life, and he was the one when I notified him about Jesse, he said, let's take care of this guy, and we did. And that led to the PHP, and here we are today. How many classes did I say? 24 classes later. It's been a wonderful ride, and we got a long way to go. Thank you. Okay, so how many now are we giving away, Frick?
Well, that would be 4.
4? All right, let's do it. So let's give away 3 dead cats first. Oh, I forgot to mention Moose is here. Over here on the green chair.
Stay awake,
Little dig there. Moose is the purveyor of the dead cat sweater. We don't have one on display anymore. But it's known worldwide, is it not? Keeping people warm. Let's give away 3 dead cats. You gonna do it?
I'm gonna draw all 3 at the same time.
How are you gonna
What?
draw? How are you gonna give it? What?
It does that now. It says number of names to be picked all at once. So we're gonna
Wow.
Well, you're just saving time, Frick.
save us time. Get out of here even earlier. All right, winner number 1, Bob Stevens in Denver, Colorado.
Bob, Denver's a good place to have a dead cat.
Winners, don't forget to email support@RobCosman.com. That goes to Gina. Tell her your size
Yeah.
and your address. Second winner is Jared Fielder in Wyoming.
Jared, Wyoming is definitely a good place to have a dead cat sweater.
And third is Steve Morin in South Carolina.
Steve, South Carolina is going to be a little warm right now, but you'll want it later on in the year. Moose, how do the sizes run?
extra small up to 3X.
Extra small up to 3X. So if you wear if I wore a large shirt, t-shirt, what size dead cat would I want?
Large.
A large? Okay, so it's okay. That's easy. All right, let's give away. Let's show it. Let's give away Rick's leather apron. Hopefully, whoever wins is going to be in a cold climate. I don't know what weight this is, but it'll stand up on its own.
It's known as heavyweight.
Yeah, it's heavyweight. Nice copper buckles. Super Duty. Doesn't hang on your neck. They're just like ours. The straps go across your shoulders. Who we sending this to, Frick?
We are sending this to
And Rick donated this, by the way. Thank you, Rick.
Craig Hertel-Ada in Michigan.
Craig Hertel-Ada
Ada, yep.
in Michigan. Craig, 8 months of the year, this will keep you warm. Don't forget. Oh, Gina will hunt you down.
Even Frick could chisel with that.
Okay, so this isn't the boxed up one, but we'll give you a. We're going to give away a crosscut or a rip. Let's give away a crosscut. We'll give away a crosscut, an RC woodworking crosscut saw.
What if they already have one? Can they take the rip?
Yep.
Yep,
And vice versa? Okay.
yep.
All right, this one's going to Marshall Stretch in Virginia.
Hey, Marshall, in Virginia. Wonder if he knows Jeff. We will send you a 9-point crosscut saw. You are going to love it, and you're going to come back and buy the rip. Now, let's give away an O'Connor product and a Burris product. So, Jeff, we're going to give away a shave brush and bowl set. I only have the brush in this one, but Jeff makes badger hair, nothing but the finest. Turns these. Shave brush and a matching bowl. It won't be this one.
Ready?
Yeah, and he also includes this really nice, smell that, tell me you don't like it. I said, tell me you don't like it.
I don't like it.
Smell
like
that,
it.
Moose. This is a Salty Mariner. That's you, isn't it? Oh, I love this. Did you smell that one, Ken? You probably had to smell. Did you
Smelled them all.
The Salty Mariner?
I like the balsam one, balsam fir one the best.
Balsam fir. I like the Buckley's Mixture one. That's really good.
Somebody wanted to know whoever made the apron has a website.
Rick Elder?
He's in the chat, so he'll let you know.
Yeah, Rick's in there. Okay, where's the bowl going?
It's going to Ron Bingham in Lincolnshire, UK.
Oh, wow. Ron, you'd be a close-shaved guy over in the UK. And the last gift is going to be a Burris creation on, I'll show you some of mine. So if you've got a date in history that's really important to you or a saying, this one means a lot to me. Kevin will do it in either slate or granite. I like the slate. There's one he did that has a picture of a famous Canadian battleship. And he'll do anything like that for you, whether it's a military themed or otherwise. I've got one out there that states our Purple Heart missions to, actually I mounted on the wall in our mess hall, and it states the Purple Heart mission. Where's it going, Frick?
Let's see. It is going to name. It's going to Brent Nelson in Colorado.
Brett Nelson in Colorado. Brett, you get a hold of us. We'll put you in touch with Kevin. He'll do up exactly what you want. Did we happen to raise any more while we've been stalling for time?
Yeah, but not over.
How close did we get? I might be able to beg.
Let me see.
I'm surprised they're letting us off early. I would have thought dovetail would be such a hot topic, but maybe we've
You covered it so well.
kicked it
So
to
many
death.
times.
Well, next time you'll cut it, Frick. We'll see if we've covered it
I'll do the
enough.
chiseling part.
Only the chisel.
Yeah, rubber chisels and dull saws. Did you come up with a number?
Yeah, no, that's it. We're done.
No. Okay. Can you tell us when we're doing this again? Are we clear in 2 weeks?
No.
Our next class starts on, Ken, the date?
Fifth.
September 25th.
Next event's the 16th.
The next live is the 16th.
3 weeks.
Yep.
And why?
Because I DJing weddings
And then when's the class start?
the week after that,
So,
or 2 weeks after that.
2 weeks after.
week after.
Week after that. So
Oh, yeah.
we'll do them back to back. That's all right. So the 16th is the next time we'll be back here. And then on the week of the classes, we always do an hour on the Saturday night before, and then an hour on the Thursday night during, and you get to meet all the guys in the class. All right. Oh, I forgot to mention, Irvin's been here doing our Instagram for us tonight. Irvin and Frick are good friends.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, RobCosman_.
Ken's been here,
Who we're with.
and Luther's been online, and Jeff and Kevin, and poor Kim's been forced to watch. All right. We'll see you guys in whenever it is, 3 weeks' time.
16th.
Okay? See
you
you.
later.